The observation deck of the Celestial Dawn hummed with its usual sterile efficiency, but Rosie barely heard it anymore. 3 months into her assignment as the human liaison aboard the Crithian diplomatic vessel, and she still couldn't shake the homesickness that gnawed at her chest like a living thing. She pressed her palm against the reinforced viewport, watching Earth shrink to a blue-white marble in the distance. Somewhere down there, her nephew was celebrating his 5th birthday. She'd promised him she'd be there. She'd promised. The tears came before she could stop them, hot, silent, streaming down her cheeks in the low gravity of the observation deck. Rosie had been trained for isolation, for the psychological toll of deep space, for navigating the complex politics of first contact. But no one had prepared her for missing a child's birthday party so badly it physically hurt. She didn't hear the door hiss open behind her. The Crithians were apex predators from a world where natural selection had been particularly cruel. They stood nearly 8 feet tall, with dense muscle beneath scaled hide, razor-sharp claws that could shred titanium, and eyes that tracked movement with terrifying precision. Their species had conquered their star system through strength and strategic brutality. Even their young were formidable, born with instincts that made them efficient hunters before they could properly walk, which made what happened next all the more extraordinary. 3 Crithian cubs, Zarketh, Shanira, and little Corval, had been playing in the adjacent recreation area when they noticed the human female in the observation deck. Their acute hearing picked up something their adult counterparts might have missed or ignored. The subtle hitch in breathing, the quiet sniffle, crying. The human was crying. Zarketh, the eldest at 7 standard years, tilted his head. His predatory instincts screamed that tears meant weakness, vulnerability, prey. But 3 months of watching Rosie had taught him something different. She'd treated them with kindness, even when their own parents kept their distance. She'd learned their names, their favorite foods, even played their hunting games despite being laughably slow. And now she was hurt. Shanira nudged her brother. "We should tell Mother." But Corval was already moving, his small clawed feet padding across the deck. He clutched his most prized possession, a holographic puzzle sphere his father had brought back from the Andromeda trade routes. Without hesitation, he set it at Rosie's feet. Rosie startled, wiping her eyes hastily. The smallest Crithian cub looked up at her with those enormous golden eyes, pushing the sphere closer with his snout. "Corval, what are you—" Zarketh appeared next, carrying a complex 3-dimensional game matrix. Then Shanira, dragging a thermal blanket she'd claimed as her own weeks ago. One by one, the cubs brought their treasures. Synthetic prey dummies, crystalline formations from their homeworld, even a half-eaten protein bar that Zarketh had been saving. They built a pile at her feet, their movements urgent, almost frantic. Rosie's throat tightened for an entirely different reason. "Guys, you don't have to—" "You are sad," Zarketh stated, his translator rendering his growling clicks into flat synthetic speech. When Shanira was sad, toys helped. "We bring all toys," Corval added, his young voice fierce with determination. "All of them. You take." Rosie knelt down, now eye level with the cubs. In that moment, she understood something profound. The Crithians were predators, yes. Their empire had been built on conquest and strength. But these children, these fierce, dangerous, beautiful children, had seen someone in pain and responded with the only form of comfort they knew. They'd brought her everything they owned. "Thank you," she whispered. And fresh tears came, but different now. "Thank you so much," Shanira chirped uncertainly. "Still sad? We get more toys?" Rosie laughed through her tears, reaching out. The cubs tensed. Physical contact with humans was still new, still strange. But when she gently touched Corval's scaled head, he leaned into her palm. Within moments, all 3 were pressing close, their warm bodies surrounding her in what could only be called a hug. The door hissed open again. Alexander, the security chief, stood frozen in the doorway. Behind him, 2 adult Crithians, parents of the cubs, stared in shock. Crithian children didn't show affection. They competed, they hunted, they established dominance. They didn't cuddle, but here they were, wrapped around a crying human, making soft cooing sounds they'd probably never made before in their young lives. "Rosie?" Alexander's voice was careful. "Is everything okay?" She looked up at him, at the Crithian adults whose faces showed something between horror and wonder. "Yeah," she said softly, stroking Shanira's ridged back. Yeah, I think it is. Later, after the cubs had been coaxed back to their quarters, leaving behind half their toys, just in case Rosie gets sad again, Alexander found her in the mess hall. You know what you did back there? He asked, sliding a cup of coffee across to her. What those cubs did? Rosie wrapped her hands around the warm cup. What? You broke about 6 centuries of Crithian child-rearing philosophy. Their ambassador is having an existential crisis in his quarters right now. Because some kids brought me toys? Because some kids showed empathy to another species. Spontaneous instinctive empathy. Alexander leaned back. The Crithians have spent generations believing that compassion is weakness, that emotions must be conquered. And 3 of their children just saw a human cry and decided independently that fixing it was more important than anything else. Rosie smiled, thinking of those fierce little faces, those determined eyes. Maybe, she said quietly, predators aren't born. Maybe they're taught, maybe, Alexander agreed. Or maybe humans have a way of bringing out the best in everyone, even apex predators. From his quarters, Corval pressed his face against the window, watching the stars. His mother sat beside him, silent, contemplative. She'd spent her whole life believing in strength above all else, but watching her son's face as he'd comforted the human, seeing the pure joy when Rosie had touched his head, perhaps there were different kinds of strength. Perhaps the humans had something to teach them after all.